Hi, this is Trevor with Trevor and Jill Talk. Today, I am delighted to be with my friend Sari Cooper. Jill and I welcome you, Sari.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic.
Now, she is really interesting. I met Sari maybe 15 years ago, possibly. She's the founder and director of the Center for Love and Sex. She's a certified sex therapist, sex coach, writer, trainer, supervisor. She's recognized as a relationship and sexuality expert and has been a regular commentator on television shows like CBS This Morning, The Better Show, and Dr. Oz. So welcome, Sari. We're so delighted to have you on the show. Jill and I have lots and lots of questions. A lot of it has to do with we're all, I don't want to say aging, but we're getting better and things are changing.
And we want to age better.
That's
I
right.
want to talk to you.
Yep. Like a good wine.
Like a good wine.
Right.
So you have this amazing Instagram and blog that is seen by many people called Sex Esteem, which is a fantastic title and intriguing, and that brings so many things to mind. Could you tell us about it? Why'd you started it? What does that mean?
Well, it came out of my work really as a therapist, as a sex therapist. I'm an ASEX certified sex therapist. And the knowledge base that people were coming in with throughout the ages, right? We see clients who are in their 20s, 30s to their 60s and older. And the knowledge base and the confidence base was so low and lacking that I felt like really people did need sex esteem. They needed confidence, knowledge, curiosity to really learn how to communicate, not only with themselves, but with a partner. So a lot of people didn't even know what they liked, right? They hadn't really explored their own bodies, their own interests. They sort of had like this one sort of scenario maybe that they did. And unfortunately for some people, they also had trauma or non-consensual situations that left trauma embedded in their bodies. So I wanted to educate adults because they didn't, so many Americans and around the world actually don't get a solid sex positive education. So for me, sex esteem is all about let's do some adult sex ed and make it fun, make it creative.
We were
love
talking
this.
about that. What's the last time that you had a real sex education class? I think I was in 8th grade or freshman year. I saw the movie on how a baby was born. And then it's just sort of what you pick up or hear or ask about or how far you want to go in terms of educating yourself. This is fantastic.
Well, I'm gonna put it in the bigger picture of I'm a therapist, and the amount of sex education I got, even in therapy school, was very low. And I practice a type of therapy that Sari's well acquainted with. And even in that model, there's very little for us to really use. So I often go to Sari's newsletter, which you can get on her website, Center for Love and Sex, and I go back to some of the stuff. So Sari's right on top of the latest research, what's going on, people's perception of porn addiction, et cetera. I have to reference you often. I didn't know, I probably didn't tell you that, but I go to you, and when I have a client who's coming up with an issue. So I think all of us, and especially now that I'm approaching 60, I turned 59 on Wednesday. Woohoo. Um, thank you. But I do think most of us don't know where to start. So let's start with women and aging. And again, I hate that, maturing. Sari, tell us about kind of what goes on for us in our response cycle, and our, we're maybe drier, we're not as comfortable, we're not as quick to orgasm. Like, what goes on for us?
Because that does seem like that's the thing that is affecting so many women's sex esteem anyways, is am I still what I was? Can I be better than what I was? And how to get about that.
And Jill, am I normal?
Am I normal?
That's for everybody, just so you know, like that's people come in, they sit down, they go, doc, am I normal? Mm-hmm. And there's this pressure really to be what people see in the media. Mm-hmm. And we know that what we see in the media is really youth-based. Mm-hmm. It's 20s, 30s sexuality, and in that even more male sort of leaning. Mm-hmm. And so when women get older, one of the main complaints they say is, I want. I want to want sex. I
Mhm.
really, I could want it the way I used to want it. What's wrong with me? Well, so what happens when we get older is those, I call it intrinsic horniness, which
Mhm.
is,
I love
those messages that our bodies would send us sometimes monthly on our cycle at certain parts of our cycle would literally remind our brain like, oh yeah, right.
Mhm.
That stuff is interesting to me. Tingling, um, just like a hunger, just like, when you want something to eat, that intrinsic horniness goes away
Mhm.
for most people, right? And so when I talk about this, I just want to talk about it in averages, not normal. In any sort of scientific research, there's a bell curve, right? And most people are on the top of the bell curve in the average, and then there are outliers. So I just want to sort of frame it that way. And so for most women, as they get older, as they go into perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, they lose that intrinsic hunger. And that's what they're talking about with when they say, I want to want,
Yes.
right? And so what you have to actually say to people is, you're not 20 anymore.
Mhm.
And what the research does show actually is with novelty, sometimes with new partners, but sometimes just the same partner, but bringing in novelty where you actually are active in, the erotic, like
Mhm.
stimulate the erotic, first of all, to think about sex, because that's also what's lost. You're not fantasizing as much. You're not thinking about it. It's not top of mind. That's also part of what people mean when they say I want to want.
Yes.
So I think you actually have to have, a wider toolbox as you get
Watch
older.
the blocks. I love that. It
You
just
also, I also wonder, part of that, besides that, is besides wanting to want, you have to want to feel wanted or feel comfortable. And I think that for so many women, they get so worried about the changes in their body, about the signals that they're getting, about that they need to be, like you're referring to this youth thing. Do you have to be completely toned and completely hairless and completely, you know, exercised and everything else? Uh, how do you help people realize it's okay, the changes that you're experiencing, and there's so much more to it than.
Because I think it's internal.
Mhm.
You have to do this kind of mindful coaching around. And by the way, listen, young women come into our office all the time feeling body shame up the wazoo. And so part of it is really, can I feel sexual? Can I feel erotic? Can I sort of express that through my body without always thinking of myself or viewing myself from
Mhm.
the external? So in sex therapy, there's a term called spectatoring,
Mhm.
Mhm.
which is, even in the act of some sort of sexual activity, you're viewing yourself from the outside in. You can't be embodied. Part of the sex esteem model is getting more embodied.
Mhm.
And uh, but to your point, Jill, there is another thing here about feeling desired. And it's kind of, that can be one of the fantasies, right? There's a whole body of research that my colleague Marta Miana has done in University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where the fantasy about being the center, the the object of desire is the most palpable fantasy. It's like a drug. It's like an aphrodisiac. And
Mhm.
that storylines, whether in porn or film or erotica or whatever, that have that arc, that storyline of the woman who's like, the person just has to like go after her, is the drug, is the major part of the fantasy.
Which is
So
probably explaining our next show on Outlander.
Everybody's so
That's
excited about
that
Outlander.
show,
But this
that's for
goes to
men too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
but this goes to one of the questions we were kind of mulling over too, and I've had this in therapy, et cetera, and people asking this, but is it okay? Because again, that to me, that fantasy, that storyline, the creation of that. Now, are you sharing that with your partner? Because I had a guy actually say, "Well, I was thinking about Giselle Bundchen," and it's like, okay, now how far do you go with that?
Right. Unless you're into her too, which
There you go.
the party. So here's the thing. A lot of people feel like, do I need to share my fantasies with my partner? And I think that goes across, I mean, there's no right answer, right? Sometimes people, tell people, you're allowed to have your private thoughts.
Yeah.
It's fine, like if that's what's getting you going and hot under the collar, great. Are there partners who sometimes sort of kind of ride each other's waves by sharing each other's fantasies? For sure. But the idea of saying to your partner, here's what turns me on, and giving them a script saying, tell me how hot I am, tell me what parts of my body you like, right? That's something you can work with, right?
Love it.
To your point, that conversation could be tweaked a little to say, so if we were going to have a third, who would you bring?
Here we go. I love it.
And it is fantasy because Janelle is probably not stopping by.
And this is the other question and I think I have the answer, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is sex in your 20s, 80% physical and 20% psychological or emotional? And then as you get older, it's much more psychological and less physical? Or is it static? Is it changing? Is it?
I think it's actually very unique to the person.
Okay.
Very unique to the person, right? So some people in their 20s, they really need the emotional connection with somebody. There are many people who come into my office and say, I'm not really into having casual sex or hookups. It just doesn't do it for me. I really need that emotional and sort of psychological or intellectual connection with someone before I get really into them. So, and then I've seen people, and I've had a client who was in his 90s who just really wanted to, have some great casual sex. So, you can't make any rules up here. It's very tailored, but I will say that people need to allow themselves compassion for their body changing. And, I always, one of the things I tell clients, and it really helps if they have or are an athlete somehow, whether it's, they used to play soccer or now they play, tennis, or they work out and do yoga. I was a dancer in my first life. I was a professional dancer. And every day I had to wake up and I'd go through a phase of like, well, wait a minute. How is it that I just did triple pirouettes the day before and today I can barely balance? And what you learn with your body, your instrument, is you have to have compassion for where you are that day. This is the body I woke up with today. Let's be curious. What can it do? Without feeling like you have to achieve something. And that goes with erections, that goes with lubrication, that goes with orgasms, right? So compassion, let's see what it can do today.
I love it.
I love it because we're so hard on ourselves in so many ways. And as you're talking, I'm wondering if almost everything you're saying applies pretty much to men and women.
Yeah. Now, do we live in a patriarchal society? Yes. Right. Are the body image issues harder for women? Yes. However, I would say that for men, they have their own set of unique issues, right? As men get older, they're more likely to have trouble maybe attaining or sustaining an erection. And for many and most men, that's their sense of masculinity. That's their sense of power. That's their sense of virility. And I always say, and when I say this to men in session, they're like, and this is what I say. I said, so what I've heard is that men would rather die than have to actually talk about losing their erection.
So tough.
And they're like, yeah, that's actually true. Because they learned at a very young age, brutally, most cases, because of bullying, that to express any vulnerability, and certainly around one's masculinity, there's severe punishment for that in this society.
Mhm, mhm.
And there's so many difficult repercussions in many areas of life because of that, which is something we have talked about, and we'll talk about more. But we did get some questions from men about this, and specifically about Viagra. Some men are kind of thinking that maybe they should start taking it, and they're embarrassed. Some men want to take it maybe earlier than they need to have better performance. Some men, it's been years that they haven't, and they're wondering, could they start again? Those are the three things that the questions that I received. So if you could address that, I think it would help so many men and women if you could talk about kind of the whole scope of that.
Right. So this idea of, uh, you know, I think the sort of thing that's in between the question being asked of, you know, should, being embarrassed about taking it, is this idea again, back to, am I normal? You
Mhm.
know, I don't, I hear this a lot. I don't take meds. I don't like medication. I don't take, I just like to be natural. Well, if it was natural, then the natural kind of response over the years for men is that they start to lose erections. They're not as common, which is why it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, because as you pass your 40s, certainly after your 50s, you're not going to have the same response if you're in that average of men. And so basically, it was an accident. Viagra and Cialis are part of what we call a class of drugs called PDE5 inhibitors. And it was kind of like an accident the way they discovered it, because it was actually for people who had heart problems,
Mhm.
for cardiovascular issues. And suddenly these men were like having, oh my God, my erections are like back, like, this is great, doc, can I have some more, you know? So if you think about it in terms of what it does, is it increases blood flow. And what most men don't realize is that their penis is part of their cardiovascular system. And so it's like almost like flushing it out. And so do some people use Viagra episodically when they need it? Yes. There are also people who use what's called daily Cialis, very low dose.
Mhm.
So you're constantly flushing it out. And by the way, you're getting these spontaneous erections.
Interesting.
That's why women are like, can I sign up for that? And they haven't gotten that yet,
Yeah. We were talking about that before. What
Mhm.
happened with that?
Yeah, we
Trevor,
were wondering what happened to
about
a
that.
female Viagra, and it
Well,
never seemed to get off the ground or work really.
so here's the thing about that. It was called initially flubanserin. It got bought out by another pharmaceutical company. It was renamed Addy. And basically, it's a misnomer that they called it the female Viagra. Why? Because, as I said, you can use Viagra Cialis episodically, just when you need it. Addy is actually a type of antidepressant, and you have to actually take it every day, and it's part of your system. And one of the reasons why it didn't get off the ground is because when in their testing of women, they had to test it with alcohol, and the subjects had to actually drink a lot of alcohol before
Really?
taking it. And so there was a little black box that had to warn women that the recommendation is not to drink if you're going to take Addy. And how many women drink alcohol in order to get more relaxed, to be in the mood to have sex?
Don't know any.
Interesting.
Listen, for some women, I think it is helpful. I think it helps with, and I'm trying to remember the stat, whether it's half an event or a 1.5 events more per month. Now, for someone who's not having much sex with their partner and they really want to have it can be very helpful.
Mhm.
But it's a different class of drugs. That's why it was like
Fascinating.
marketed incorrectly, if you will.
Interesting. I did not know that. Thank you for explaining that to us. So, Jill and I were kind of talking about this, and you brought up a gentleman who is 90 years old. Like, is there a point where none of us can have sex anymore? We're just too old, or or we can be sexually, I don't know, turned on Right to the very end.
Involved, but not, in the same way. It's like, what happens?
Great question. So one of the terms that I use with people to kind of reframe sexuality is the term outer course.
Outer course.
Outer course.
Mhm.
Why? Because the term that's most popular in the media and for years has been foreplay. And what does foreplay mean? It means before play. And it's usually meaning for heterosexual sex for the woman before play, which is the real sex, which is penetrative vaginal sex,
Mhm.
right? And so we're reconfiguring that because most women, as we know, do not have orgasms from penetrative sex alone. There's about 25% of women who don't have to have any clitoral stimulation and can orgasm from penetrative sex. Okay? The rest of us need a lot of clitoral stimulation, direct clitoral stimulation. A lot of us need more of a turn on up here to get started. A lot of us need simmering touch or stimulation that's not just about breasts and genitals,
Mhm.
right? And so the idea of having outer course allows people to get old with pleasure. Okay?
Mhm.
So
I
there
love
is even, and I'll say to men, I said, I bet you don't realize that you can actually have a really pleasurable climax with a soft penis.
that. Mhm.
And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, that's a thing.
Good.
That's the
A
thing.
lot of people are going to want to talk further to you.
Well, I think that,
I mean, this is not wrapping this up, but I want to make sure that we let everyone know how if they do want to talk to you, and it's through the Center for Love and Sex, they contact you through your website.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sari Cooper. So I don't know if I read it on your website, but I read an amazing, speaking of outer sex, women in heterosexual relationships have orgasms somewhere in the high 30 percentile of, events, right? So somewhere in that range. Women who are in lesbian relationships have orgasm closer to like 75 to 80% of the time.
Right. I think the stat is more like 60, 63% based on their last event or so. Right. And what we call that is an orgasm gap. We talked about a lot about the wage gap since the women's movement, but this is an orgasm gap in America.
Isn't that fascinating?
And
I think
men have orgasms, 90% of the time that they've had a sexual activity,
Hmm. That's
right? Now, that could be because women are faking it,
Mhm.
which we haven't really talked about that kind of performative piece of sex, which really is not embodied. It's about, again, that kind of spectatoring of like, I have to be like a porn star kind of thing. And also this idea that, women don't have enough sex esteem to show their partners how, to stimulate them.
Mhm.
I mean, we're not as simple as men, and you do have to know yourself. That's why I'm saying the sex esteem is not just only about telling a partner, it's about knowing yourself and being able to show a partner like, hey, this is what really feels good to me.
Now, are you supportive of vibrators and toys and whatnot? I'm hearing a little of, I don't know, I can't remember the woman who wrote, it's called Slow Sex, but she suggests put away all the vibrators and the porn and just get embodied and have this sort of oming sex experience with your partner, which I think sounds lovely and wonderful. It's time consuming, but it's very focused on, to your point of really knowing your body and your own response cycle. But is that a thing? How do you feel about that?
I actually think whatever, floats your boat. And I think if toys do it for you, do it, bring it in, pleasure yourself and
Mhm.
figure out what feels good to you and then show a partner. A lot of women feel like, I'll say, have you ever actually, stimulated or pleasured yourself in front of your partner? And they'll go, no. These are straight women, self-identified straight women. And I'll say, well, why not? Well, I'd be too embarrassed. Like that would be just like way too vulnerable. So I actually think there are a lot of techniques you can use with your hands.
Mhm.
Sometimes people have, based on their belief system, or if they were raised in very strict religious or repressed families or cultures, the idea of actually touching their genitals, they grew up thinking, these are women, that touching their genitals is dirty or
Right.
disgusting even. So the idea of touching themselves is like a turnoff to them. So that's actually more advanced for them. So
Mhm.
what I say is, what's a first step? What's a baby step that you can do that'll just help you, get turned on a little bit to see if what you like to be touched. So I try not to make hard and fast rules for people because everyone's on their own path, on their own journey. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I love it.
It seems like there's a little bit of a shift um, to making that much more normal quote, if you want to use that word again. I'm bringing that word back, which is probably bad. It's just I noticed, in the very upscale lingerie store in town now, they're selling vibrators, and of course we have Gwyneth Paltrow everywhere with every version of candle and vibrator possible. So do you think that's helpful now to both women and men to bring things like this into the conversation? And
I do. I just think that being able to feel more empowered and talk about it and show and bring it out to a partner, it just lessens this shame. I mean, America's quite a Puritan country, and
Yeah.
the idea of like not even having these conversations. That's why encouraging and promoting sex esteem groups, so people can actually create a group of their own, and they can start talking in a very sort of frank manner about, what feels good. What do you have any tips, right?
Mhm.
That that you would say about even like your diet or food or exercise. Like, I have this great workout, you should try it. Women don't talk that way about sexuality.
Mhm. Mhm. I do feel that this next generation, millennials and younger, are much more positive. They're using words that are very specific, like vagina and penis. When we were growing up, you almost wouldn't say that. I don't think I used the actual words till much later in life. So I feel like we're seeing some change. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Or is it still just as Puritan and tight?
I think it is Puritan in some ways because
Mhm.
they may be able to say the words, but they may not be able to say it to a partner.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm. Yeah. And
Interesting.
so, they may not know enough about their own range. I mean, I don't think people realize the kind of the vast range of erotic and sexual experiences that you can give yourself or a partner or receive from a partner. And it's that kind of edge to challenge yourself to say, I don't know, let's see. Let me see if I like this.
Check it out.
Check
I
it
do
out.
think we still have, this sort of, as you mentioned, we live in a patriarchal society. Much of the way we've judged women been based on her sexuality. So she gets shamed. She's either the Madonna or the whore. She's either the good mom who's perfect, or so I still think that's percolating under the surface. Is that part of what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, listen, girls from this time that they're in middle school or even earlier now get slut shamed early on,
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
by
Yeah.
what they're wearing, by how they're posing in a photo, because it's also like a very image-driven society now with social media. So it's finding, women feel like they have to, be on this very narrow line. God forbid they should present themselves in a sexual manner. And people are just like, all over them.
Mhm.
I mean, the quickest way to insult a woman is to call her a slut or a prostitute,
Mhm.
right? As
Mhm.
if being a sex worker is a shameful, job,
Mhm.
which is actually starting to change in certain circles, right? If it's not, if it's a consensual and a self-empowerment kind of job.
Yeah, no, we can't judge that. If that's someone's choice and they like it and that makes them feel good and they're good at what they do, awesome. it's just a very slow change of, a society who's being willing to open up and be both sex positive, and men not feeling threatened, but empowered too, right? Instead of having these very small little boxes of what a woman is or isn't.
Right. Like even talking about your number and the sort of dichotomy between men like feeling like, oh, my number is really high. And women feeling like I'm not, if they're straight, I'm not going to tell my partner
Mhm.
number, right? If it, because God forbid they should turn around and call me a slut or promiscuous, and then I'm not considered relationship, you know.
Not
uh,
valued.
right, right.
Mhm.
I hope that's changing a bit also with younger generations. I think it is to some degree, at least from what I know. I don't know. I also hope that men, so many things we're talking about are, are sharing ideas and feeling more comfortable. I hope men are also talking about that or wanting to hear this or wanting to be part of the discussion. I do know some, and in fact, I have some friends who it'd be the first thing that they would love to talk about, what would make a woman happy and what could they do?
Mhm.
But that's still very few and far between, at least in my generation, I think. And
It
I think
is.
that a lot more than I want to know it, they want to know. I think that they'd love to, I think many more people would love to know that these experiences are available to them and that they not only, instead of worrying,
Mhm.
sorry for this disaster technology thing that sometimes you think you're past them, but then they surprise you. But we're lucky enough to be back with Sari Cooper on our great sex education for adults show today. And you've been amazing, Sari, with so
Oh,
much information people need to hear. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg, I think.
well, we were talking about men and sex.
Mhm.
And I think that men are, when they get into a session, they are so relieved that they can talk about something without shame. It's huge for them. I mean, I actually am in the process of starting up a men's sexual health group. And
Oh.
actually, yeah, it's for men who are dealing with what we call out of control sexual behavior.
Mhm.
that that ranges from anything from women, women who are outside their monogamous agreement with their partners. It's sex online where they feel like they're out of control and they're spending too much money on porn, to people who are going to sex workers and they get discovered by a partner, right? And they feel like it's a compulsive habit. So that's actually fascinating because we have men from all different cultures, all different ages, who are able now to talk about kind of what is sort of below or underneath the actual
Mhm.
behavior, the meaning of it for them.
Mhm.
Because
It's
women always have I shouldn't say always, women generally have a group of good friends that they can get to more intimate topics with, whether it's something that they're doing for fun or they need, serious, they need help. But men don't often feel that comfortable with their friends talking about these issues.
But usually, again, because I'm going to go back to the emotional kind of underpinnings of what's going
Mhm.
on in these behaviors, which is
Mhm.
it's a great place to actually start being vulnerable and being clear with yourself of like, if this impulsive behavior is impacting your life, right? That's what they would find somebody like you or me. We have to find out why. What's
Mhm.
missing? Where do they not feel safe? Where the shame is coming up? What, maybe they don't feel good about their professional life, or they're not really relating to their partner in another way. So it's so good for men, and again, so rare to really support and give men the runway. So what a great idea. And this I'm hoping is online, so I can give it will be Zoom based, etc. So I can give some clients.
Yeah, it's Zoom based, starting up in a couple of weeks, and it's under the tab of services on the Center for Love and Sex website. And I did a short version of it in the fall, and it was really powerful. And these are men from literally 3 different cultures who are in this, in this group. American, foreign born, second gen. And what they brought to the discussion was all these myths and taboos that they grew up with around masculinity, about, acceptable sex. That split that you were talking about earlier, Jill, of, what traditionally has been called Madonna horror, we call love lust splits, where, there's the safe, connected, emotionally, comfort zone of a partner, but all the kind of dirty, naughty, transgressive desires and fantasies have to be played out outside of that relationship.
And they're finding a safe space in this group with you to talk about this, which is really, really good. So
important.
yeah.
Well, Sari, we
Excellent.
are so thrilled that you spent some time with us on the phone or on Zoom. And we have
Twice.
about 10 million more questions for you. We'd love to have you back on.
Before we go, can we fit in a couple of questions I promised people? Do you have a couple? Is that all right?
Yeah.
The first one was, can you give maybe a little starting place, a couple minutes to sort of have to rejuvenate things, have something really fun this weekend with my partner?
Do we know what gender this person is?
That's from a female.
That's from a female. And so I actually think talking about the most exciting sex that one had with your partner, and starting with something positive, right? People always
fun
negative and say, here's something, I always go back to when I'm like with you or even by myself, and I imagine this time that we had together, and it was just like amazing. And what was your favorite time? And that's just to get it heated
That's
up.
a great icebreaker.
That's amazing.
Right? And then say, listen, I am going to bring a little surprise this weekend. And it could be a small thing. There's some great sex games out there that you can order online. There are obviously toys and lube and, and then toys for men too, if this woman is, has a male partner. But I think to say, I'm going to bring a surprise. First of all, you're doing it ahead of time. The juices get flowing. It's something to look forward to. And she's taking initiative to say, I'm going to try something new.
And this goes back to the first thing you talked about, how, we need something, we need novelty in some way to sort of get things going.
Right. And I think what people try to avoid is awkwardness. Well, what if it doesn't work? What if it falls flat? And I think I try to teach an artist's mind to people.
I love that. What does that mean exactly? Describe that.
As I said, my roots are in modern dance, right? And so to create a new piece out of nothing, you go into a dance studio. If you're using music, you put the music on and you try something. And it may be what ends up being in the final piece, but it may just be something you've tried and it doesn't feel like great to me. But if I don't go in there and I try to improv, I'm not going to find anything. And so if people approach their sex life, I'm just going to try this thing. We may end up laughing hysterically because it's so awkward. Or we might there might be a nugget in there of something that we didn't even realize turn us both on.
I love that.
And isn't so much of it that someone wants to try for you?
Yeah. Well, they're bringing it. They're coming.
They're bringing it.
Bringing it. And they're present.
That's cool.
Yeah, I always think about it. Someone initiates some sort of sexual activity with you. Think about it as a gift.
Yes, I love that.
Right? Like, what do you say when someone gives you a gift?
Thank you.
It's so nice that you gave me this gift. And if they are not in the mood, or they have no energy, or it's a bad day, what they can say is, thank you so much. That's so sweet. I'm so happy you initiated.
Yep.
I'm going to take a rain check.
I like that too.
And then the onus is on that person to actually remember within a day or two to come back and initiate.
Because one of the toughest things is rejection, right? The minute you feel like you took that first step and you were vulnerable, and that person maybe thoughtlessly didn't understand that sort of harsh you can shut down a whole lot of exciting, happy times by even one or two of those kinds of responses. It could have been like you did have a bad day. But I love that, to be able to say, let me take a rain check. I appreciate it. I feel wanted and loved. And, next time is my, my responsibility.
Yep. I always think about it as like tennis, you hit the ball over the, you know, I mean, Trevor, the idea of the bid for closeness
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm,
couples therapy. And
mm-hmm.
it's like hitting a tennis ball over the net, and you need to have your partner hit it back.
Yeah. Just be responsive. I see you, I hear you. But again, because sexuality is such a area of so many feelings, excitement, thrill, but shame and worry, like it's just so layered in so many ways that if you throw that, you hit that lob over and the other person doesn't take it in this very kind, soft way, you can do some real damage. So I try to say to my couples, like, just be really aware. And a lot of times I've got, sort of, oftentimes it's gendered, the guys, like, I wish she would initiate.
Mhm.
Right. And she's like, well, I don't even know how to do that.
Right. So that's vulnerable, that the way she's
Mhm.
answering. And yes, guys find, most men, heterosexual men, and gay men too, find it so hot when their partner not only initiates, but is having the best time.
Yep. So I
Hot.
really hope a lot of women out there are listening and they can say, well, maybe I'll feel empowered. Maybe Jill's question this week will just come up with something new, maybe something small, and, tweak it a little bit. Try something new.
I
Change
have
the
to
game.
say, as a non-professional with both of you, what this has done for me, and I think a lot of people I know, is to say that there is so much health information, great possibility out there, no matter where you're at. So I would definitely start with checking out Sari's, her blog, her website, her Instagram. This is amazing information. And then if you want to, you can have an appointment. You can have a session. It'll be amazing.
We do sex coaching, and if you want, gather some of your friends who you feel really safe with, and email me, and we could do like a sex esteem group.
That
Oh,
would be so
wow.
fun. Jill, let's do it.
That would be awesome. I've had a year of Zooming, not knowing about this Zoom.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
that would be fantastic. There's so many more questions. We could go on for another couple hours, and I hope that we can again.
That'd be
So thank you so, so much.
I always have such a good time with you gals, and I can't wait to hear about your Outlander.
Lots to say there, but now we're coming armed with better information, so that's good.
And
So
I do
thanks
think
again.
it'd be really fun to have Sari on maybe a follow-up show on with the Outlander groups and the Bridgerton groups, because it'd be really fun, Sari, to hear your thoughts and impressions of what those two shows were bringing up. And we have one group who says Outlander's all about the feminine gaze, and then Bridgerton's all about the male gaze. So I would, over time, would love to get more thoughts from you. And
That sounds fun.
Yeah. Right, have a great weekend. Thank you again for your patience, and to be continued.
All right. Take care. Bye.